The first time I saw it, I thought it was a trick of the light. The second time, it looked back. I was 3 weeks into my night shift rotation when the hospital started to feel different. Daytime hospitals are noisy, predictable. Machines beep, people talk, footsteps echo with purpose. But at night, everything stretches. Time slows. Sounds carry farther than they should. Even the fluorescent lights seem tired. I was assigned to Ward C, post-operative recovery. Nothing unusual, mostly stable patients, a few elderly cases. The kind of ward where you expect quiet, not surprises. That night, around 2:17 a.m., I was doing my routine rounds. Vitals, charts, silence. The hallway lights flickered slightly, not off, just dimming and returning like a slow blink. I remember pausing, looking up, waiting for the hum of the electrical system to stabilize. It always did that. That's when I noticed something at the far end of the corridor. A shape, not a person, not exactly. It was darker than the shadows around it, like a silhouette cut out of the dim light, standing just outside room 12. I assumed it was a relative. Sometimes families sneak in after visiting hours. I started walking toward it. "Hello," I called. No response. The shape didn't move. It didn't shift weight like a person would. It just existed there. I kept walking. Halfway down the hall, the overhead light flickered again, longer this time. Just a second, maybe less. When it came back, the corridor was empty. No one at room 12. I stood there for a moment, trying to process it. My brain filled in explanations quickly. Someone stepped into the room, the angle changed, my eyes misjudged the lighting. Normal things. I checked room 12 anyway. The patient, an elderly man recovering from surgery, was asleep. His breathing steady. No visitors. No sign anyone had been there. I told myself it was nothing, and for the next few nights it was, until it wasn't. About a week later, I was charting at the nurse's station around 3 a.m., the quietest hour. Even the machines seemed softer then, like they didn't want to disturb the darkness. That's when I felt it. Not a sound, not a movement, just the feeling of being watched. I looked up slowly. Across the hall, near the supply room, something shifted. Again, that same unnatural darkness. A figure without detail, no face, no features, just the outline of something standing where the light should have been. This time I didn't call out, I just stared. It didn't move. Seconds passed, maybe longer. Then, as if dissolving into the wall itself, it was gone. No footsteps, no sound, gone. I got up immediately and walked to the supply room. Checked inside, empty. The motion sensor light flicked on as I entered, revealing shelves, boxes, everything exactly where it should be. But my chest felt tight, because this time I knew what I saw, and it wasn't just a trick of the light. Sleep started becoming a problem after that. Not during the day. I slept fine at home, but on shift, especially between 2 and 4 a.m., my mind felt off. Slower, like it was struggling to keep up with reality. One night, I mentioned it casually to a senior nurse. "Do you ever feel like you see things at night here?" I asked. She didn't laugh. She didn't even look surprised. She just nodded slightly and said, "Don't follow anything you can't explain." That was it. No elaboration, and somehow that made it worse. The third time it happened, it wasn't in the hallway, it was inside a room. Room 9. The patient had been restless all night, waking, pressing the call button, complaining of seeing someone near the corner of the room. I assumed it was post-anesthesia confusion. Happens often. At around 3:30 a.m., I went in to check on him. The room was dim, only the bedside lamp was on, casting long shadows across the walls. He was awake, staring past me. "Do you see it?" he whispered. I turned. At first, nothing. Then my eyes adjusted, and there it was, in the corner, between the curtain and the wall. A shape, not solid, not transparent, just wrong. Like a section of the room where the light didn't behave properly. My heart started pounding. I stepped closer. It didn't move, but as I got nearer, the edges of it seemed to shift, subtle, like smoke holding a shape. The patient gasped behind me. "It's closer," he said, but it wasn't. Or at least I didn't think it was. I blinked, and in that instant, gone. The corner was just a corner again. Empty. I stood there for a long time, longer than I should have, because for the first time I wasn't just seeing something. I was sharing the experience. After that, I started paying attention to patterns. Time, always between 2 and 4 a.m. Lighting, low, uneven, often flickering. State of mind, tired, focused, slightly strained. And the patients, not all of them, but some, especially those recovering from surgery or on certain medications, they reported similar things. Someone standing there, a shadow in the corner, something watching. Always vague, always just out of clarity. The last time I saw it, I didn't feel afraid. I felt curious. It was near the end of my rotation, same corridor, same dim lighting. The figure stood at the far end again, but this time I didn't approach. I just watched, and after a while I noticed something I hadn't before. It wasn't completely still. It pulsed, very slightly with the rhythm of the flickering lights, as if it wasn't an object in the hallway, but a distortion of how I was seeing it. I blinked slowly, focused on the edges, and for a brief second I could almost see through it. Not a figure, just overlapping shadows, angles, depth misinterpreted by a tired brain. Then the light stabilized and it disappeared. The first time I noticed it, it moved before I did. Not fast, not sudden, just enough to be wrong. Night shifts train your brain in strange ways. You start noticing patterns most people would ignore. How certain machines beep in predictable rhythms, how footsteps echo differently depending on who's walking, how the lights in some corridors hum slightly louder after midnight. Your mind adapts, sharpens, but it also gets tired. And when it gets tired, it starts filling in blanks. That's what I believed anyway. I was working imaging support, mostly transporting patients between wards in the radiology unit. It meant long walks through quiet hallways, especially between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. when everything slowed down. The route I took most often passed through a service corridor behind Ward B, no windows, just a long stretch of pale walls, low ceiling lights, and the occasional metal door leading to storage rooms. It was the fastest path. It was also where I started noticing the delay. At first, it was subtle. I'd be pushing a stretcher, moving under the overhead lights, and I'd catch my shadow stretching along the wall beside me. Normal, expected. But once or twice, I noticed something strange. When I slowed down, the shadow didn't. Not immediately. It would continue just a fraction longer, like it hadn't realized I'd stopped. I brushed it off. Lighting angles. Multiple light sources overlapping. That kind of thing can distort shadows in ways that feel unnatural if you stare too long. So I stopped staring. A few nights later, I was returning alone from radiology. No patient this time. Just me, the empty stretcher, and the hum of the building settling into itself. The corridor was dimmer than usual. One of the overhead lights near the middle had gone out, leaving a darker section where the illumination dropped off unevenly. I remember thinking maintenance needed to fix it. I kept walking. As I entered the darker section, my shadow stretched ahead of me on the wall, long, thin, slightly distorted. Then I slowed down, and there it was again, that tiny delay. My body stopped. The shadow took one more step. I felt a cold, tight feeling in my chest. It wasn't just that it lagged, it was how it lagged. Not like a glitch, not like a flicker, like something correcting itself too late. I stood still, staring at the wall. The shadow was perfectly still now, matching me, normal. I let out a slow breath, almost laughing at myself. "Get a grip," I muttered. Then I stepped forward again, and this time I swear it moved first. I didn't run, not then. I walked, faster than before, but controlled. I told myself it was perspective, that my eyes were adjusting to the darker section and misreading motion. By the time I reached the end of the corridor, everything felt normal again. Bright lights, clear shadows, no delay. I finished my shift without mentioning it, but I started avoiding that hallway. Of course, avoidance doesn't work in a hospital. A week later, staffing was tight and I had to use that route again. This time, I paid attention from the moment I stepped in. Everything looked fine. My shadow behaved exactly as it should, perfectly synced with my movement, stretching and shrinking under each light. I felt almost relieved, until I reached the dark section. The broken light was still out. I slowed my pace, watched carefully. Step, step, stop. The shadow stopped with me. Perfect. I exhaled. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I stepped backward. My shadow shifted, but not correctly. For a split second it leaned the wrong way, like it had expected me to keep going forward. I froze. The hallway was silent, completely silent. No distant footsteps, no machines, just the faint electrical hum above me. I took another slow step back. This time, the shadow corrected instantly. Normal again. I stood there, staring at it, trying to force logic into what I'd just seen. Then, without thinking, I raised my hand. The shadow followed. I lowered it. Still normal. I almost convinced myself it was nothing, until I turned around. There was another shadow on the opposite wall. Not mine. It was faint, hard to notice unless you were looking directly at it. A vertical shape, slightly broader than my own outline. Standing still, I didn't move. Neither did it. My mind raced. Another person behind me, casting a shadow from a different light source. That had to be it. I turned quickly. The corridor behind me was empty. No one, no movement, no sound. I turned back to the wall. The second shadow was gone. Only mine remained. After that, things changed. It wasn't just the dark section anymore. Sometimes, even in fully lit areas, I'd catch something just slightly off. A shadow bending at an angle that didn't match the object casting it. A movement that seemed to start before I moved. Always brief, always subtle, always deniable. But it built up, night after night, until I started dreading the quiet moments. The worst night came near the end of my rotation. Around 3:40 a.m. I was pushing an empty stretcher again, heading through the same corridor. The broken light still hadn't been fixed. I almost laughed at that. Some things never get repaired. I entered the darker section and stopped. Not because I wanted to, because something felt wrong immediately. The air felt heavier, quieter than usual. I looked at the wall. My shadow was already there, but I hadn't stepped far enough in for it to reach that position yet. It was ahead of me, waiting. I felt my pulse in my throat. Slowly, carefully, I took one step forward. The shadow didn't move. It stayed exactly where it was. Then, it shifted, not in sync with me, on its own. A slight tilt of the head. I stopped breathing. The outline wasn't mine anymore. It was close enough to pretend, but the proportions were off. The shoulders slightly wider, the head angled just a little too far. I took a step back. My real shadow pulled away with me, but that one didn't. It stayed, fixed to the wall, watching. I couldn't hear anything except my heartbeat. No hum, no distant noise, nothing, just that shape. I blinked hard, once, twice, still there. Then slowly, it stepped forward, not across the floor. Across the wall, toward me. That was when I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the main corridor, where the lights were bright and the world felt normal again. I didn't look back. I didn't check the wall. I just stood there, breathing hard, trying to steady myself. Eventually, I convinced myself it had been exhaustion, stress, my brain misfiring under low light and fatigue. That explanation held, mostly, until the next morning. I was finishing my shift, logging out at the station, when one of the maintenance staff walked past. I stopped him. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "That light in the service corridor middle section, it's been out for a while. Any reason it hasn't been fixed?" He frowned. "What light?" "The one that's out. It makes that part of the hallway darker." He shook his head. "All the lights back there are working fine. I checked them yesterday." I felt a slow, cold weight settle in my stomach. "No," I said. "There's definitely one that's out." He looked at me for a second longer than necessary, then shrugged. "I'll check again," he said, and walked off. I didn't go back to that corridor after that. I requested a different route, different duties, anything that kept me out of that space. Eventually my rotation ended. New shift, new floor, normal again. But sometimes even now I notice it. Not in a hospital, not in a corridor, just in ordinary places. Walking past a glass door. Standing under a streetlight. For a split second, my shadow doesn't quite match me, and I don't stop to check anymore. Because I'm not sure what I'd see if I did. Or worse, what might already be moving before I do.